JPC Letters. World population. Here is info on world population over the years which I thought might be of interest in relation to the thoughts of DK. The discrepancy between births and deaths are an indicator of the current world problem of overpopulation, a major world problem. Sustainability being the question in mind, do we fully understand that the problem of excessive sexual appetite, in general throughout the human race, has called in too many souls as DK mentions, thus amplifying the extinction or pressure on animal and plant resources in general to the point at which we now globally find. We should carefully note that the cause of this major world problem is the unnatural preservation of life, triggering the herd life in humanity, and is according to the Tibetan the cause of much suffering, the economic problem, many wars, the world overpopulation, and all contrary to the karmic intentions of the planetary logos. Alice Bailey states, the economic situation will make it necessary that certain physical restrictions should be imposed, because it is now evident that beyond a certain point the planet cannot support humanity. This is more fundamental in its implications than you can imagine. Again, we have evidence of a growing realization of the race along this particular line. That realization is as yet distorted and much misunderstood, and is today producing the promiscuous use of contraceptive methods. As the intelligence of the race is developed, and that is going on apace, as the laws of rhythm and approach are grasped, it will then be found that there are certain innate reactions which will negate conception, and that then the mechanical means will no longer be required. This sounds as yet extremely vague and almost impossible, but the race is rapidly achieving personality control, though our idea of rapidity may not be yours, and this, in its turn, must produce certain automatic and inherent changes. This is a point which must be grasped by esotericists. Anna 134. End quote. We could ask ourselves, at what point do the words of DK take effect? It is now evident that beyond a certain point the planet cannot support humanity. The need for fair distribution of resources is all the more imperative. The Tibetan speaks of birth control or restrictions as being fundamental in its implications regarding world population and sustainability. What if no restrictions had been developed? Perhaps humanity would not currently be sustaining on Earth as it now is. Probably we may have had great resource wars greater than already experienced. Perhaps we may have even wiped ourselves out. I don't find the current situation as being on plan or target, but we live in the knowledge that whatever happens we are the creators of our own destiny. The strain on humanity to sustain itself, and let's note that large portions don't sustain adequate basic essentials to live a humane existence, is stupendous, with the urge to greater mining of resources and consumption of the already well-fed at ever-increasing levels, not to mention the developing countries demanding the, according to DK, far too high living, material and eating standards of the West. The over-material and already industrialized and industrializing countries require a high population. The consumption of land and leisure/media technology all face hierarchy, with the ongoing problem of human release from lower to higher levels of awareness. The population 1927, around the time frame of OB/DK writing, was around 2 billion from 1 billion in 1804. DK referred to the then unduly large population. In 2011 was expected to reach 7 billion, and should we consider this extraordinarily dense and occultly Lemurian. That's many souls that were never intended at this time. We are perhaps speaking of undue and unlimited propagation of the human species, on an unprecedented level, perhaps far exceeding the dense population of peak Lemurian times, with their uncontrolled sexual appetite and promiscuous spread of sexual disease, somewhat reminiscent of today's world problem. We should note the hierarchical intention for the use of contraception and that human numbers cannot sustain successfully on the planet along hierarchical expectations with that of the larger proportion of humanity's reasons for using contraception with promiscuous intention for almost unlimited sex without responsibility. The Tibetan and Ob states. Millions of souls have been brought into incarnation who were never intended at this time to incarnate and achieve exoteric manifestation. This fact is largely responsible for much of the present economic distress and for the modern planetary dilemma. The economic situation and the necessity to provide for the unduly large population of the planet lies behind much of the aggression and greed of the nations down the ages, and for the effort being made today as never before to provide better and more adequate living conditions. War has consequently been the inevitable result of this undue and unlimited propagation of the human species. This lack of sexual control has brought into the world thousands of unwanted children whose appearance is solely the result of accidental and uncontrolled sexual relations, and in no way indicates the planned intention of parents' plan because intended to offer experience to incarnating souls, with the conscious intent of offering the opportunity to hasten the birth into the light of those particular souls, thus rendering service to the divine plan. Anna 135. End quote. New and unlimited were great predicting and foresightful words of the Master who referred to the promiscuous use of contraceptive methods. What would he make of the situation today? The Lemurians were occultly and numerically referred to as the extraordinarily dense population of its civilization. The sexual relation between the human and animal population today is not applicable relatively speaking, though the appetite between the male and female animal nature is still rampant and in question currently. To qualify this thought or hypothesis, the rapid growth in human population has expanded beyond all reason. I think it is fair or reasonable to say, according to general and scientific thought, the karmic problem would be addressed by the reduction of the number of souls called prematurely into incarnation and the release from the fear of death, thus propagating life beyond the reasonable limits breached by the fear induced by the Black Lodge. Human desire and control, including control of the sexual and fearful imagination and an understanding in time of the laws of rhythm and approach, will serve to alleviate hierarchy of their problem and humanity of the undue suffering it today participates in. Key to this is the growth and intelligence of the race, which runs apace with personality control. Control is key, and the inherent result of personality control is the almost automatic response to time and season or rhythm in approach, with the resulting knowledge of the rightful calling into incarnation of the souls that karmically are due and at the correct time, thus outside of this conception will not take place. The symbolic, great approach, and subjective approach is karmic and chronological. The analogy and correspondence between the birth of the human kingdom and the birth of a human being is to be given serious thought by the student and has many indications as to the living processes involved. To quote the Tibetan DK, 1. Great approach of the hierarchy. Sun in Leo. Individualization. Initiated upon the physical plane. 2. Producing outer physical events took approximately 5,000 years to mature, and the Sun was in Gemini when the final crisis of individualization took place. The subjective approach, the first step of the ego towards producing a shadow, is expressed in the words, "The ego sounds his note." That it is the ego that sounds the note is highly important to bear in mind in view of the planned intention of the parents and their souls, and the planned sounding of the depth or height of the note of the soul being called into karmic response, to produce a lower self or personality in full incarnation, is a scientific, astrological and occult process. See also whole TCF 938. DK draws our attention to the fact of the ego sounding its note and the parents responding in karmic sequence, thus in context of personality control rather than sexual gratification and desire. DK therefore hence in relation to this astrological and karmic reality that outside of the correct times and seasons for the controlled personality, conception will or may not follow due to the innate intelligent mental reactions and understandings, thus intellectually or mentally nullifying the calling into incarnation of a soul out of karmic time, resulting in no conception. Promiscuity of the sexes also refers to the having of more than one wife. JPC Letters 27/01/2014